Hi, Ken from Audio Talk. I'm going to talk about cone material for dome tweeters and for dynamic drivers like this, like the most common thing that we see for mid-range in a woofer. And what I have found is that it changes depending on where in the frequency span we're talking about, if it matters or not. If you're talking about a subwoofer, like down in the lows, 80 hertz and down, it's really not that easy to tell the difference between a polypropylene or a paper cone or something like that. It's very, very hard. It's easy to tell once you're up in high frequency. And another area particularly that's like emphasized is the area from like about 1,000 hertz up to about 3,000 hertz, because there's a lot of information for us every day that we have to dissect, because that is the primary area of the speech area. So we're really honed in as a human race into that area to hear very small details. So what that then does is that you want the expensive materials to be producing the higher tones. That's where they're really important. And luckily, that also requires less of a size to move air to do that. So luckily for us, the high tones are, I mean, it would be absurdly expensive if we had to do a diamond woofer, for example, instead of the tweeter. But I mean, the diamond tweeter is really expensive too, and also there is diamond layered woofers, but absurdly expensive. So anyway, so there you have the dynamics there. So besides that, they have all these different materials have different breakup. The breakup is when the cone here no longer can keep itself stable. And we want it to move the air in a pistonic manner, is what is being called. Pistonic meaning that it moves the air and, just like straight up and down, in and out. Because the moment that this starts to like give in and move sideways in the material itself will add sound, and you would have outphasings. You will have negative and positive interference from different areas of the cone. So you will actually have a non-linear response, and you can see that in your what's it called, in your diagram, your data, your TL small parameters. You see that frequency curve all of a sudden starting to do things, and that is where you can spot the breakup. So once you have like a big steep lift or a dive, you can count on that being a breakup. And that doesn't sound very good and has different signatures depending on what material we're talking about. The very stiff ones, like the metal cones, would typically have an extremely harsh breakup. They would stay stable for a very long time, but then once they hit that breakup, you really need to get rid of that. Where the paper cone can be more like, okay, well, it's a little harsh, but it's still kind of nice and fuzzy. So there's some dynamics there. But let's get into each of the materials first for the woofer, and then we'll talk about the tweeter afterwards. So paper cone, we tend to, most people really like that one. I mean, let's just get right to that. When we think of live music, that is typically the sound we're thinking about, because the stage equipment is paper cones, or the guitar amp in front of you is paper cones. So there's a tendency to judging that as live music, even though it's adding something to the sound. Where something like Kevlar is more accurate, and also when it has its breakup, it's fairly you can live with it. Those two kinds of cones, if done right, they can nearly work without a crossover at times. So you really have to look at your data, but those are the ones that I have seen that is able to do it, where that aluminum, polypropylene, ceramic, and even magnesium woofer cones, typically you really need to cut that breakup out because it's very harsh. So, but what's interesting about the Kevlar is that it's being accurate. Many people take that as boring. So, so that's why that it's mainly what people call a audio purist or a hi-fi an audiophile that will go for that kind of material here and there, and so where the paper cone is more entertaining. Carbon fiber is somewhere in between paper and Kevlar. It has a little bit of more fuzz to it, a little bit more coziness, and still very low breakup and very stable. But it's kind of like in between. That's why you don't see it a whole lot, because it's not that much of a statement. I actually use carbon fiber a lot because I think it has a nice level of entertainment and a lot of accuracy for details. So there's some idea to all of it, basically. But the paper cone is typically the most entertaining. So one thing I want to just throw in there is that the glass fiber cone or fiberglass cone often is thought as being a Kevlar cone because it's yellow, but it's very different from the Kevlar cone because fiberglass is relatively heavy, so it can be very filling as a subwoofer or a lower frequency, but tend to not have a very good overtones. So it's a cheap woofer, but decent. So it's more like comparable to polypropylene that we'll get into in a second. So very different from Kevlar. Just because they look the same, they don't sound the same. Yes. So polypropylene there's a lot of variation to polypropylene. It's a plastic material, so it can be very warm to listen to, and it can be sterile to listen to. It can be both. One mixture of polypropylene can be one thing, and another one can be another. So there, you're really looking at, you need some experience listening to the different types of woofers. So price would typically be a fairly good indicator on those to whenever it's good or not. And then you can look at the frequency response, and if there's a lot of irregularities, then it's probably fairly cheap sounding. Yes. Aluminum. I have quite a few things to say about aluminum. It's great, it's stable, it's light, it's really good at moving air, it's inexpensive, but the breakup sound of aluminum is absolutely horrendous. So my recommendation is that don't use it over 400 or 500 hertz. Typically subwoofers, it's great. I will say once you pass the 120 hertz mark, I tend to like the paper cone again, because then you can hear a little bit of that wooliness to the paper, and it makes it more warm. But if you're down beneath 80 hertz, I think you can make a really great subwoofer with an aluminum cone. Yes. So the good ones at the end here, ceramic, typically a little bit expensive, but great, very low distortion throughout the frequency span. Once it hits that breakup though, it can be pretty harsh but not all of them. Some of them are really well designed, so they just kind of roll off. So very good material. The one drawback I see, in my ears with ceramic, is that it's a bit on the dead side compared to the price. We have magnesium. There is right there with it, and much more lively and with more detail, if you ask. That's my experience from the drivers I listen to. So I really favor the magnesium cone out of all of them. It's very honest and still has great feel of life to it. You still really can't use it for like PA and like ripping a tailgate party up. It's a little too cute for that. So, but very, very nice hi-fi sound when you're talking about the magnesium cone. In the end, you have the ridiculously expensive diamond-coated polypropylene, which is the most pistonic, meaning like the most stable membrane of them all. Sounding incredible with details, and it's stable really far up. Just absolutely absurdly expensive. I don't even think you can get them as DIY. I think they only come in factory made speakers. But anyway, they do exist. So that's it for now for the woofers. Let's take the tweeter. So a lot of the same ideas come into place here. The textile is like this one right here. This is a little silk dome. It's kind of like the paper cone. It's cozy. It's a little bit drawn, like pulled back, and not so a lot of sensitivity up in the very high tones because of its weight, but it's always kind of cozy. You can have a cheap textile dome that sounds harsh, but that's because it's really cheap then. So that's why you find them in a lot of speakers, because you obtain some nice, decently detailed and cozy sound at a very reasonable price. And they do go up, to be quite nice if you get some really expensive ones. So they're not, there's some good ones there. But we're talking about some serious stuff here. This is, we're on our way into the high end here. So titanium is pretty harsh on some of the overtones unless it's done really nicely. There is, of course, titanium drivers that sounds very clear and pretty, and the breakup of the cone is past your hearing so that it's not bothering you. But for the most part, is the titanium driver and aluminum driver a bit forward and has a lot of these S sounds, like and that's gotten better over time. Now there's better aluminum, better titanium that is more that has the breakup past your hearing, so that you just get the clarity. You hear a little bit of harshness to them. They have a little bit of edge. So preferably to things that need to play loud, they can be more fun to listen to. And so they have their place for sure, and they can be, when done correctly, also produce some nice hi-fi, just like the textile dome. But now we're moving into the ones that is undeniably better than the ones we've been talking about previously, and that is beryllium and diamond. The diamond tweeter is extremely pistonic, very clear and bright. The price is the problem here. It's hard to get past the fact of dishing out way past $1,000 for a tweeter. So that's where the beryllium comes in. It's so close to the same clarity, and it has a little bit of an easy demeanor that makes them easy to work with generally. So I really, really like them. It's getting more and more affordable. I think you can get them down to about $400 or something like that. That's still a lot of money. I know that, but it still is quite a stretch to get to the diamond. Then in the end, we have the ceramic, tweeter. Just a couple of brands are really doing them. Not that many. I also think that it's kind of like in between, like it's between titanium and beryllium. I think they're good. Again, like the woofer, I think they're a bit on the dead side. They can be very, very clear to listen to. It's almost like there's missing some of the life to the sound, but very accurate, low distortion. So absolutely a great option for, and a very, very nice build for something very clear. So yeah, that was something about membrane materials. I hope you could use as a part of your research to find out what you really want with your sound, creating your own pair of speakers, or if you want to replace one of the drivers, what kind of things that you're bringing into your current system. All right. Well, I hope you got something out of it and have fun with your projects. Hope to see you next time. Take care. Bye.